Welcome back to Bookkast, Bestsellers in Minutes, where we dive deep into those books everyone's talking about.
Yeah, getting to the good stuff, without having to wade through hundreds of pages.
And today we are cracking open Melania and Me, Melania Trump's autobiography. It was published back in 2020.
Oh, interesting. I remember when this one came out, it definitely generated a lot of buzz.
Yeah, you might be thinking another political tell-all, right? But trust me, this is different.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's less about the political drama and more about Melania's personal journey, before and during her time as First Lady.
So kind of like a behind-the-scenes look at her life.
Exactly. Think childhood in Slovenia, a modeling career that spanned continents, and of course her marriage to Donald Trump.
And I'm guessing life inside the White House, too.
Oh, absolutely. She doesn't hold back on that front.
What I find fascinating is how Melania uses her story to explore these bigger themes, like individual liberty and resilience.
Yeah, those ideas are woven throughout the book.
Yeah.
And they actually trace back to her childhood.
Growing up in Slovenia under a communist regime.
Right. Let's rewind the clock a bit. Melania paints this picture of her childhood town, Sevnica. Imagine lush forests, the Sava River winding through it. It sounds idyllic.
It does. But it's important to remember the context. This was communist Slovenia. And for Melania, this wasn't some abstract political theory. It was her daily life.
And she doesn't shy away from sharing how those experiences shaped her worldview.
Even seemingly small ones, you mean?
Yeah. Like she talks about her father, Victor. He had a passion for cars, Mustangs, BMWs, even a Citroen Maserati SM.
Wow. Quite the collection, especially for that time and place.
It was. But in a communist society where conformity was prized, that kind of individuality could attract unwanted attention.
Oh, I see. So standing out wasn't always a good thing.
Exactly. Melania recounts instances where her father's car collection actually drew scrutiny from the authorities.
That's a detail that stuck with me, too. It seems to foreshadow her later concerns about government overreach, particularly during her time in the White House.
Right? It's like those early experiences planted the seeds for a deep-seated belief in personal freedom and this weariness of government intrusion.
It's a reminder that there's often a lot more beneath the surface, especially when it comes to public figures. We tend to make assumptions based on what we see, but there are always these deeper layers.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears from communist Slovenia to the world of high fashion. Melania takes us on her journey from architecture student to international model, and it wasn't always a glamorous catwalk.
I was struck by her honesty about the challenges she faced. Like, she talks about not always fitting the mold, being told she was too tall or too skinny.
She even experienced what we now call bullying because of her appearance.
It's hard to imagine that happening to someone who would later become a fashion icon.
Right, but she persevered, and that determination really shines through in her writing.
She had this drive to succeed on her own terms, and that focus paid off. She won a modeling competition in Italy, which opened doors to the international scene.
But even with that success, she encountered some less than savory characters along the way.
I'm guessing that comes with the territory in that industry.
Unfortunately, yeah. She recounts walking out on a photo shoot in Milan because the photographer tried to pressure her into something she wasn't comfortable with.
It's impressive that she held her ground, especially being young and new to the industry.
Yeah, it speaks volumes about her character. She refused to compromise her values, even for a potentially lucrative opportunity.
It shows a real sense of self-worth. And that's something I think a lot of people can relate to, no matter their background.
Okay, so fast forward to 1998, New York City Fashion Week. This is where she crosses paths with Donald Trump at a party.
A story that's been told and retold, but I'm sure hearing it from her perspective adds another layer.
Definitely. Their romance was this whirlwind. They began dating soon after meeting and were married within a few years. The wedding itself was this extravagant affair at Mar-a-Lago.
And her choice of a Dior gown for the wedding? A classic Melania move.
Right. Speaking of which, I loved how she wove in details about fashion throughout the book. It's clearly a passion for her, not just a superficial interest.
Absolutely. It goes beyond just clothing. It's about aesthetics design, expressing yourself creatively.
Now, after the wedding and the whirlwind of the fashion world, Melania shifts gears in the book to a more personal chapter. Motherhood and becoming a U.S. citizen.
This is where we see a different side of her, I think.
Yeah. You see her dedication to raising Baron, her son, and her pride in becoming an American.
It's interesting how she contrasts her smooth path to citizenship with the often difficult process many immigrants face.
It does highlight her empathy for those who struggle to navigate the system. She describes it as this labyrinth of paperwork and legal hurdles. It humanizes her in a way that we don't often see.
You're right. It reminds us that behind the public persona, there's a real person with relatable experiences and challenges.
And it sets the stage for her later work advocating for children and families, particularly her Beesist initiative. But before we dive into that, we need to talk about the moment that thrust Melania onto the world stage, the 2016 presidential election.
This is where the pace of the book really picks up. We get Melania's perspective on the campaign trail, the controversies surrounding her speech at the Republican National Convention, the relentless scrutiny of the media.
It was a lot to handle. She was thrown into the spotlight facing intense pressure and often unfair criticism.
And you can see how those experiences shaped her approach to being First Lady.
She became more guarded, more controlled in her public persona.
She had to learn to navigate a world that often felt hostile. And one of the most memorable moments from that time, of course, was the "I really don't care, do you?" jacket incident.
That jacket sparked a media frenzy. And in the book, Melania explains her thinking behind it. She saw it as a message to the media, letting them know that she wouldn't be broken by their negativity.
It was a bold move, and it definitely got people talking. Whether you agree with her choice or not, it revealed the steely determination beneath that carefully crafted exterior.
It also marked a turning point in her relationship with the media, which only intensified as she entered the White House.
And that's a dynamic we'll explore further as we delve into the next chapter of Melania and Me.
So stay tuned, because things are about to get even more interesting as we go behind the scenes of the White House years.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Melania and Me.
Picking up where we left off,
Yeah.
Melania is entering the White House. A whole new world, new expectations.
Yeah, it's one thing to be on the campaign trail, but being First Lady, that's a whole other ballgame.
Okay, so how does she approach the role? We see her overseeing renovations, tackling issues like cyberbullying, the opioid crisis. But what about the more, I guess, traditional First Lady duties?
The state dinners, the diplomatic visits.
Right.
Well, this is where Melania's personal touch really comes through. She talks about, for instance, choosing gifts for foreign dignitaries. It wasn't just protocol, you know.
More than just a formality.
Yeah, it was about making genuine connections, showing respect.
She even shares a funny story about navigating those cultural differences, you know.
Oh, tell me.
Her visit to Saudi Arabia, she wasn't sure if the king would shake her hand, because it's not always customary there.
Oh, right. Men and women shaking hands.
Exactly.
So what happened?
Well, he not only shook her hand, he kissed it.
Oh, wow.
A real gesture of respect.
Yeah.
It's these kinds of details, I think, that give us a peek behind the curtain of diplomacy, remind us it's more than just politics.
Human connections.
Right. And speaking of which, her trip to Africa in 2018, it seems like this one was particularly significant for her.
It was a pretty extensive trip. Ghana, Malawi, Kenya, Egypt. And she really focused on those personal connections, especially with women and children.
She visits schools, hospitals, orphanages, even has this memorable encounter feeding baby elephants at an orphanage in Kenya.
Oh, how sweet.
Although one of them gave her a playful nudge.
Oh.
But it wasn't all lighthearted moments. She also visits Cape Coast Castle in Ghana, major trading post during the Atlantic slave trade.
Wait.
Yeah. And she doesn't shy away from that history in the book. She reflects on the brutality of slavery, the importance of remembering even those dark chapters.
Powerful reminder that these historical sites are more than just tourist destinations.
Absolutely. Okay, we need to talk about Melania's relationship with the media.
It was tumultuous, to say the least.
She faced constant scrutiny, negative coverage throughout her time as First Lady. How does she address that in the book?
She's pretty candid about it. Talks about the pressure to present this perfect image, constantly being watched, judged. She even names specific outlets and journalists.
Wow.
It's unusual for a First Lady to be that direct.
It is.
But it shows just how frustrated she was with what she saw as unfair, biased coverage.
This feeling of being misunderstood, it really weighed on her.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, it all kind of culminated in the "I really don't care, do you?" jacket incident.
That jacket, it became this lightning rod.
Yeah.
And in the book, she doubles down. It was a message,
To the media.
Right. I'm not going to let you break me.
It sparked so much debate. But agree or disagree, it shows a certain strength, a refusal to be silenced.
And it's not just traditional media. She also talks about the challenges of being a public figure in the age of social media.
Right, that constant pressure to project the perfect image, the lack of privacy, the online bullying.
It's a lot for anyone to handle.
And she's especially concerned about the impact on children, which ties back to her Be Best initiative.
Makes sense. She had a front row seat to the dark side of the digital world.
Absolutely.
We can't talk about Melania's time as First Lady without talking about January 6th, the attack on the Capitol.
It was a terrifying day for the whole country.
How does she reflect on that experience in the book?
She describes it as a day of chaos, fear, being evacuated to the bunker with her family, that sense of uncertainty, danger. It's a very visceral account.
It must have been unsettling, to say the least.
And she's also critical of the media's portrayal of the event. Felt like they were quick to blame her and her husband.
So, as she's approaching the end of her time in the White House, the 2020 election looming, what are her feelings?
She's open about the disappointment of losing, but she also expresses pride in what her husband's administration accomplished.
And as she prepared to step back from that spotlight, did she hint at what she envisioned for life after the White House?
She makes it clear that she wasn't ready to retreat from public life entirely. She still had things she wanted to accomplish, hinted at some causes she's passionate about, like fostering children.
Something she was very involved in as First Lady.
Right. So it's not an ending, more like a new chapter.
And that's what makes Melania and Me so compelling. It's a glimpse into the life of a woman who defied expectations, navigated a world of intense scrutiny, and ultimately forged her own path. Welcome back to Bookkast. Bestsellers in Minutes. We're wrapping up our deep dive into Melania and Me. We're looking at Melania's life after the White House, kind of like what happens when the cameras turn off.
Right, what she chooses to focus on when the spotlight fades a little.
One thing that stood out was her work with Fostering the Future. This initiative that aims to help kids in the foster care system, get access to education support.
Yeah, it feels like a natural progression from her Be Best initiative, a real dedication to those kids, especially the ones facing tough situations.
It definitely speaks to her own experience too, right? Being an immigrant herself, understanding those challenges, needing that support system.
Right, and that empathy comes through, I think, in everything she does, not just talking the talk, but actually walking the walk.
She also mentioned some entrepreneurial ventures. She launched a line of NFTs.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Kind of unexpected, given her concerns about the digital world,
It does show she's open to new things, willing to adapt, not afraid to experiment a bit.
Maybe it's a way to connect with people in a different way, a new audience for her creative side.
Now, as she transitions back into private life, she also reflects on, the tougher parts of being First Lady.
It definitely took a toll, the constant scrutiny, no privacy, always having to be on.
She even shares some moments where she felt isolated, misunderstood by the media, even the public.
It's easy to forget that public figures, they have those same vulnerabilities, those human moments of doubt and loneliness, no matter how high profile they are.
But even with those hardships, she talks about the positives too. Serving her country, traveling, meeting new people, making a difference.
A balanced view, acknowledging those sides of the coin.
And I think that's what makes this book so interesting. It shows how full of contradictions she is. Strong but vulnerable, private but public, traditional but modern.
She doesn't fit neatly into a box, and that makes her story all the more fascinating.
It really encourages us to look beyond those headlines, the snap judgments, and see the complexity of her experience.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's what we try to do here on Bookkast.
Right. Dive deeper into the stories behind the bestsellers.
So as we close the book on Melania and Me, what do you think the future holds for her?
Hard to say, but she's clearly not one to shy away from a challenge. Maybe she'll continue with her advocacy, maybe new ventures, who knows?
Whatever she does, I'm sure she'll do it her way.
And that's Melania and Me on Bookkast. Bestsellers in Minutes. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the life and memoir of Melania Trump. Join us next time for another bestseller, all wrapped up in minutes.